Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm going to talk about something that I did talk about before in a previous video this summer. I talked about continuity and whether or not DC and Marvel are becoming post-continuity comics. But I never delved into the question of whether or not people would actually want post-continuity comics. But something has happened here at Marvel, which is the release of Conan the Barbarian, which I think has given us a very good indicator of whether or not people will want post-continuity comics. And I'm going to go over that just briefly, and it's almost a canary in the coal mine for what people want in their comics, and I would also say what age group people are and what kind of person actually buys comics. These two Conan books that are coming out really are going to provide a earmark for what people actually read Marvel comics, I think. And briefly, I'm going to go over what the first Conan the Barbarian was about, which just came out. And I wanted to just quickly note as well, I don't do videos anymore that are reviews of comics on my channel, just because, well, I think everybody else has that covered. And what I do now is 10-second reviews, and I post them on my channel. And if you're subscribed, you probably will see the posts. If you ring the bell, you will probably see all of the posts. And it's just a very quick little summary of comics that I review. But I'm going to talk about Conan the Barbarian, which came out. And I have to say, as a Conan fan, this was an excellent story. This book is beautiful. I love this Conan the Barbarian #1. Besides the fact that Marvel has garbage paper and garbage ink for all its books, this was a great Conan title. And the story went like this. First of all, on the first page, you have your normal quote from the old books of Conan, which you have usually at the first of every Conan book. Then they had a double splash page of the old Conan comics from Marvel. Then they moved into a scene for the main story, which is basically a copy of a scene from the Conan the Barbarian movie, which I didn't mind so much, because right after that, they moved into its own story, which really was a very unique story and really was told well, and told in a way, very unique way for a #1, and especially for a Conan, because Conan is kind of like a short story. Short stories, you really shouldn't actually put in more than one timeline at a time, and especially if you're doing a #1, but they do that in this book, and they do it superbly well, and it's done in a way that actually makes it a really good story. And the thing is that I believe it's there in order to tie in all of the continuity for Conan the Barbarian, because it appears they'll start from the first, where they have the quote from the book. So they're paying homage to the books, then they pay homage to the Conan books that Marvel put out. Now, briefly again, the old Conan books that Marvel put out, there was a number of them. There was Conan the Barbarian, there was Conan the King, there was the Savage Sword of Conan, then you had Red Sonja and all the other ones which were basically offshoots of Conan. So in Conan the Barbarian, you had your main story of Conan in his prime of life, and then in Conan the King, you had Conan later on in life when he was a king. And both of them followed a basic continuity. That is to say that they had stories which, at the very least, went consecutively. It had a linear progression. And I did an older video where I talked about a great run of Conan, where I say that, this Conan story was a culmination of him moving eastward for almost 100 issues. And there were certainly jumps in stories, and you would get a place where you would end a story arc, and the next story arc would have none of the same characters except for Conan, and he would be somewhere else entirely, but it would be further to the east, and it would be further in time. There was a continuity of time and place in these Conan books, for both Conan the Barbarian and for Conan the King. But in Savage Sword of Conan, it's something completely different. In Savage Sword of Conan, you had a story arc, but the story arcs did not go consecutively. They simply went on a story arc from some time in Conan's life, and they could be mixed all together. It didn't matter. It was like these were stories for Conan fans that just couldn't wait for the normal continuity stories and wanted more. And that's how they plan to put out Savage Sword of Conan next month. That's the way they're going to do this again. Now, to move back to #1 of this Conan the Barbarian that came out. it had a story where it ties together both Conan as he was in the prime of his life and Conan the King. And I believe what is going to happen with this storyline is that Conan the King is going to die, and he is going to be rejuvenated back into his prime of life, his savage self, and he is going to go back to being Conan the Barbarian again. And if they do this, and they're doing it really well, which it appears they are, it would pay homage again to both the books and then all of the stories that came before for Conan in the Marvel books, including Conan the King. This way, they will be able to put out new books with new stories and won't be tied down by the fact that these old Conan the King stories are supposed to happen after the stories that they are writing. So this is a very unique way of doing it, to actually include all of that continuity. And I do believe that's what they're doing with this. So the point is this. We have Conan the Barbarian. It has continuity, at the very least in time and space, and it is paying homage to all of that continuity that came before. And at the same time, next month we have Savage Sword of Conan coming out, which doesn't actually have a continuity in place and time. So it's basically separate stories, as if it was a filler episode. You know, you would have a story arc and it's a filler episode. It doesn't have to be in the same place and time. So this will give a very good indication, I think, that once we look at the numbers for both of these Conan books, what kind of story people are looking for. Now, for continuity for Conan itself, it is actually part of the Marvel Universe. That is to say, Conan actually exists in the same world as Hulk and Thor and Captain America and Spider-Man. He just exists somewhere between 8 and 10,000 years before they existed. So it is actually part of the main continuity of Marvel, but since it is something like 10 millennia before anything else that happens, it might as well be in its own continuity. And all of these things play together, and I think when it has come out for a number of months, and I would say 6 months or a year, we will be able to see with these two titles whether or not Marvel readers actually want to read a Marvel story that is in continuity. And on top of that, whether or not Marvel readers will actually want a Marvel story that has to apply to the main continuity of Marvel. We'll see if people are actually buying this. And besides that, we'll see if people actually want the Savage Sword of Conan, which is non-continuity, which doesn't have to be continuous and contiguous and be linear or any of that, or they want Conan the Barbarian. Because in my older video, I said, I do believe that comics are to some extent becoming post-continuity. Certainly you have in Marvel and DC all of these things going on which people just seem to ignore continuity. You have things like DC where the entire Earth went into the negative zone in a Superman and no one really seemed to care except for Superman. You have in Green Lantern where the entire Earth was shrunk down and sold and no one cares about it except for Green Lantern. You have in Marvel Galactus landing in Latveria in the last issue, and the only ones who show up to deal with this are Doctor Doom and the Fantastic Four, but you have an entire world of superheroes in both of these universes. These should be all hands on deck kind of situations, but they're not. So it ignores some of the continuity for the comics. However, I must note, this is not the idiotic SJW kind of ignoring of continuity, where they ignore something they put 5 pages ago, or they twist and pretzel all of reality around their character to make them look great. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm simply talking about stories that are good stories, but don't anchor themselves in as much continuity as most of us are used to, certainly in Marvel and DC. And in my last video, I said, I don't mind that so much, because certainly with DC, they do that well. You have plenty of stories with DC that actually still do that. And I'm used to old DC stuff from the 70s, where you have a lot of Earth A, Earth B kind of stuff. You have different kinds of continuity going on at the same time. And DC has things like the Freedom Fighters out now, which are on Earth X, and they also have Batman Damned and Batman White Knight. These are not in the same continuity, so it doesn't really matter all that much to me if you have an entire universe in the same continuity. But as I said, these two Conan books, I think, are going to be the earmark of how they sell and which one sells better. Because in putting them out almost at the exact same time, with very different structures, as long as they keep with their good storytelling, and it appears to me that they will keep with their good storytelling for these two books, and I suggest, certainly if you didn't get number 1 of Conan the Barbarian, go and pick it up. But if they keep with their good storytelling for these two titles, it will give a very good indication of a number of things. Number 1, who is the reader for Marvel? Because people today have a very short attention span. They don't have the attention span that people had 20 years ago, certainly not 50 years ago. And the younger you go, the less attention span they have. People today, younger people, probably have already clicked off this video because I've been talking for over 10 minutes. And you got the younger generation with stuff like TikTok, where they have videos that last 15 seconds and then they have to move on. So I would say that if the numbers show that people want continuity for Conan the Barbarian over the Savage Sword of Conan, you will have an older audience, and it will show that there is an older audience out there ready to buy this book. And again, I firmly believe that this book is going to do fairly well. It's certainly not going to reach the top tier of either Marvel or DC, but it's going to be better than the garbage tier books that are being put out there, like Kamala Khan and Miss Marvel and Captain Marvel and Squirrel Girl and all of those kinds of things. It's going to show with numbers that there is a science fiction fantasy base out there and what demographic it is actually made up of. So it will be very interesting to look at the numbers of the sales for both of these Conan books as compared to the rest of the Marvel books, because again, Conan is a character which almost appears to be out of continuity. And can Marvel sell a book that is out of continuity? Today, I would say yes. But at the same time, comparing the two books to each other will again show whether or not the comic reader, the base for this comic for Conan, will actually want more a continuous story with Conan the Barbarian, or can just jump all over the place with the Savage Sword of Conan. And again, this is all presuming that they're going to keep up with good storytelling. Now, of course, this has nothing to do with Marvel. That is to say, Marvel did not mean to do any of this, I'm sure. They're just simply putting out new Conan books because they probably want to put out a new Conan movie. That's all they want to do. And part of it might be, and this is me just shooting in the dark here, but they want to steal back the actor from Aquaman and make him Conan again, because the MCU does nasty little things like that to the DCEU in order to keep them down. They've done it in the past. But the great thing is that inadvertently, it's almost like a scientific test that they are putting out there with these two books at the same time to see whether or not people will actually want continuity, what kind of continuity they will want, and what is the age demographic of who the readers of Marvel Comics actually are. And I will be looking at this very intently to see what I can draw out from those numbers. So I just wanted to do this video, this short video now, because I wasn't going to wait until 5-6 months until this happened to do it. That's too long. I'm actually quite excited by Conan. So if I gave you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me whether or not you care there is continuity of time and place. If it is a good story and they tell them in a way that is not in continuity, does that matter to you? As long as they tell a good story. Oh, and don't forget about my 10-second comic reviews, which I put up as posts on my channel, if you want a quick review of some comics that come out every week. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.